We all on our stations, man.
Am I not supposed to be sitting this close?
You're fine. You're fine. You got room, man. You got plenty of room down there. You want me kicking off, man? So welcome to another episode of Above Average Black Men. Yours truly, Chris Pender Sr.
Devin Pender, here to let y'all know that we're here to inspire, empower, and uplift the community. Also, like, follow, subscribe, share, and comment. You want the interaction. We want to talk to y'all. We want interesting topics. So interact with us. Talk to us. Holla at us.
Yeah, man, we definitely want to get involved. And I guess starting next week, you really got to start pushing the phone number. But
Yeah.
Today's show is going to be interesting because I've been asked this question a lot. The topic of today's show is, what are you willing to fight for? And a lot of it is going to stem around starting with the brawl in Alabama to our poor infrastructure when it comes to our schools and, even food deserts in our community. And when I mean fight, I'm not talking about physically fight.
How what they were doing down there?
Yeah, but we won't cover the whole thing. But because I've been asked that question, and I was on a call Monday night with a bunch of brothers, and it was Christians, and somebody asked me the question. I was sitting in the office yesterday. Somebody else asked me the same question, and it was a topic discussion today. So I'm getting mixed. It's mixed emotions about it. It was one thing. The general consensus was that, and I'll start here, that it was about time. Everybody started the conversation the same way. We don't condone violence. We don't. So we're not talking about the violence. However, everybody I talked to, everybody felt that, that we as African Americans, that we're at a breaking point, and enough is enough.
Yeah.
And some people comment it's about time somebody actually got involved in something and not just filmed it.
I was about to say I'm coming from that standpoint, whereas I'm just happy that instead of people just filming this guy getting beat up, that people put down the phones and took some action.
Well, one guy got a nickname, he called him Aquaman, because he actually
he swam over.
I mean, it's and so for people who don't know, in Alabama, there was a situation where African American security guard, there was a boat, full of Caucasians docked, and I'm assuming they had been drinking because what happened afterwards. And he told me they couldn't dock there because that dock was set aside for another boat, and they couldn't stay there. So apparently this conversation went on for half an hour, if I understand. So it wasn't like it was just.
I didn't know that.
I was told it went on for. This was a long conversation, and I guess they got agitated because he kept saying, "Oh, you can't park there," and they were like, "Well, I got here first." So I don't know what drove them to get off the boat and attack him. Part of it had to be that he wasn't armed. Yeah. I'm sure that what it kind of slowed the conversation. But they did, and it would appear that women were involved too. It appeared that women were involved too. So the boat that was supposed to dock there shows up. Lo and behold, it just happens to be full of African Americans.
Is it like the ferry or something?
Yeah, so one guy jumps off and swims. Hence Aquaman. So it's interesting.
Fell in a lot of myths there, by the way. You see how quick he swam over there?
That is funny. But it's crazy because that's been the topic of conversation. And everybody pretty much starts the same way. They don't condone violence. But it's about time.
It was definitely very refreshing to see, because when I think about it, the security guard, he was like, what, in his 60s?
Yeah. See, that's the part I don't know.
Yeah. They were saying he's an older guy in his 60s. And just to see stuff like that, that's your elder. You're supposed to show him respect no matter what. And then to see him get attacked like that, it's so refreshing to see all these young brothers go out there and just defend them.
I didn't want to just hop in right on cue and say I do condone violence.
Well, no, everybody.
But you want to know what's funny? Because I think about kind of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, where it's like, the turn the other cheek mentality, and it versus we need to be about some action. I think it's nice to see us come together. I wish we could come together and when other things are on the line versus always kind of being violence like this, right? But at the same time, it's like, man, it felt good to see him watch.
Malcolm X in his later days wasn't the same Malcolm X. Yeah. And I understood her because I felt the same way. I was actually calling with a bunch of Christians. I don't condone violence. However, in that situation, is unavoidable. And what I mean is unavoidable is there's no way you could have went there just to break that up. Because the minute you showed up to break it up, they would start hating you.
Yeah.
So so I get what everybody was saying, but the thing behind it was everybody did kind of feel like, it's about time. That needed to happen. And because I'm gonna address what Devin said, because when I saw it, the video after you told me about it, the first thing I thought about, you were saying how that was a shame, but back in the civil rights, before civil rights, and back in the South, that would happen a lot. Young Caucasians would beat up older for whatever the reason.
And you wouldn't be able to see us step in and do that, right?
Yeah, that was, I mean, look what just think about some of the stuff they did.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. What grown Caucasian men did to African Americans. Emmett Till.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when I saw it, it kind of brought back, some of, because when I was in school, you used to see those black and white videos.
Right.
They showed you, Ozzie Davis and them had these videos, and they would narrate, and you would see all this, the atrocities perpetrated against us. And I think the other thing that kind of made it worse was the nonsense that's coming out of Florida, because people are hearing that, reading that. Slavery, did us a favor because we learned the skill. So today, I want to talk about hard work.
A strong hand.
Because today I read something that was crazy. That the Department of Education in Florida, they've agreed to issue another statement behind this stupid video. I don't know if you saw a video with Christopher Columbus.
No.
Ron DeSantis has this video with Christopher Columbus explaining away slavery. Like it really.
Christopher Columbus.
Yeah, usually Christopher Columbus, like same thing I said. But anyway, I'll say the statement, then I turn it over to you.
Wow.
They're talking about that how slavery actually was a compromise amongst all the unions, because it was a compromise for unity. And I'm thinking to myself, like, so to pick a particular group of people and mutilate them, beat them, kill them, treat them like animals was a compromise.
The thing that's crazy
for the good of the country
to me is like how historically slavery has been everywhere. It's just a part of world history, not just the United States. And I think it's kind of interesting how other countries can kind of come to terms with their past and say like, this was an atrocity. It's slavery. We're gonna call it is what it is. Like, this is what people did back then. Versus here, it's like you can't even, like, they want to not even say slaves existed. Like it was something that was benefit. But it ain't benefit nobody but the people who started.
But I think the biggest difference is in this country, slavery is responsible for this country.
Pretty much.
If you look at from the White House to the inventions, slavery was very capitalism, you might as well say.
Pretty much.
There's firms on Wall Street that was founded back on slavery that made money off of slavery. Or selling, leasing slave ships, because the poor people in the South couldn't afford it. So they would rent these slave ships from up north. So, slavery has deep roots in the building of this country, from Wall Street to all kind of things, man. Slavery, the backs of slaves, contributed to the United States of America. And I think if you couple that with the fact that, Obama became president, he got the highest position in the land,
I actually heard that spot in Mississippi where the brawl took place was a slave port.
Alabama?
Yeah, Alabama. I keep saying Mississippi. Same kind of Mississippi.
You know what I mean? If he's from Mississippi, he didn't mean that. He was
trying to be a northern.
I'm sorry.
I just think, and the reason why I say what do we want to fight for, because I don't condone it, but it was good to see us standing up for something positive.
Yeah.
On the other hand, where are we united on voters' rights? We got the worst school systems in the inner cities.
So that's something I was going to ask, because again, it felt good to see, black people coming together. It's like, stand up for it. Like, I wish I was there. I was like, the signal. Anytime I see a hat flying out, I'm going to be paying attention. But
now we got a bat signal. It's a hat signal.
But I think again, it was good to see us come together, but on the other side of it, I do think there's too much of a celebration behind it a little bit. Like, you see, like, it's the only thing that people are talking about. Like, it's good to see us. It's
but you know me, and I don't. But I don't think for some people, the people I talk to, it was more of a relief. It was more of about time, because they felt like a lot of people, a lot of Caucasian people have been taking more liberties and more liberties and more liberties and more liberties as time passes on since the orange hair dude was in office. You know, so people were, I mean, some people felt like, man, you know, when's enough going to be enough? Right? Yeah. And to Devin's point, you know, that's a 60 something year old dude. That wasn't no 25-year-old security guard, you know, and you know, and it was a bunch of people jumped on. It wasn't like one guy, it was wrong with one guy. And the video I saw was a lady involved. Now, somebody told me she was trying to break it up, but I saw her in handcuffs later, so I don't know how much she was trying to break it up. She was swinging. But it just, that kind of symbolizes what's happening in America right now that people don't want to admit. So a lot of people feel like, wow, now you saw, you know, for people who talked about history and talked about the South and lunch counter, call them modern day, you know, lunch counter moment. Where what do you can't tell me what to do, boy. Who are you? We're gonna teach you a lesson, we're gonna put you in your place. So you saw that live. And see, the other thing about it, people don't realize, man, yo, these things are dangerous, man. They capture everything.
Everything. Oh my, I seen all kinds of angles. I was just like
so I don't, maybe some people were celebrating, but the people I talked to was almost like, and you started by saying it when you started, it's about time.
Yeah. But you know, it's crazy when I think that we all kind of live in different worlds with our generations. Yeah. So it's like, I feel like your generation is probably more apt to, y'all going to talk about it. Like, like y'all going to call each other, have a conversation. Like for us, you just see nonstop posts online. You know what I mean? Like on your feed, your scrolls, people reposting funny memes about it. Somebody got a tattoo. A tattoo of the chair.
I think it was dressing sport.
I think the difference is, you know, for people like myself, and you know, we still believe there's hope. We still believe that there's hope for the human race. That racism won't forever be an issue. You know, we still hope that there'll start to be a reconciliation, that people come to terms. And I think for some people in your generation, it's like, look, y'all ready to do the whole Marcus Garvey thing. Yo, just give us ours and we catch all y'all later. So I understand what you're talking about. I understand what you're talking about. And again, I don't condone, and people know, and I think that's why they ask me the questions, because they know me, they're trying to see the reaction. But I threw them off with my question. You know, of course you're gonna go help the guy. But once you go help the guy, how do you not get involved? There's no way around it. Because just because you show up to help, they're not gonna stop.
Right.
They're
just because you're
right now, we're gonna let you go. It's still 15 of us and one of you, or two of you. So I think you that's what you face in the dilemma. What do? And I think you have to help them. Yes. You know, you have to help them. I think, you know, well, I take it back. I think you should be compelled to help them. There's some people who wouldn't. You should be compelled to help them. So I think that was my answer to the question. And also flip it, if it was me, I would want somebody to help me. You know, if that was somebody in my family, you know, I don't know his situation, but that could have been somebody's father.
It could have been a lot worse. Like, could you imagine? Like, this has been stories where people get beat to death.
Or had they not gotten him, you don't know. Right. You know, you could knock him down, he hit his head. You didn't know if he could swim. You could not. It's just, I agree, it could have went worse. But I just think hopefully it's an awakening for what's really happening in this country that people want to deny. That people just outright want to deny. When you hear people say, oh, why are they making decisions? Racism doesn't exist anymore. We don't need this anymore. We live in a colorblind. You hear all this stuff all the time.
What do you say to someone that tries to make that like not about race? Because I can't see a group of black people beating up that black man.
How can it not be about race? I mean, and see, people who say that to me, they're in their minds, they already had their minds made up. Because the perfect example. If there was a group of African Americans jumping on a Caucasian person, it would be about race. It would be about race. They wouldn't sit here and try to decipher.
It'd have been like Central Park 5 all over again.
Yeah, you know, and okay, that's a perfect example. You brought it up. Donald Trump still hasn't apologized. He took out full-fledged ads to get those guys killed, death sentence, all this stuff like that. So you can't say it's not about race. You know, you say it's not about race, but the amount of times it happens to African Americans, yo, what is it about?
Yeah. I mean, I think again, I keep smiling when I talk about it, and I'm trying not to smile too happy about it. Because you know what, I think I am one of those people who lean against the side of like, man, it's about time. And ironically, I think we talked on our show last week about how like, oh, what are we going to come together for? You know what I mean? Like we were legit just having this conversation because we felt like, you know, we can't come together on certain issues, but we know we can come together to fight.
But that's the thing about it. That's the other side of the coin for me. people are not rallying around the fact that, they still got lynching on the books in some of these southern states. Nobody's rallying around the fact that they're trying to reverse vote all the voter rights they put in, so we had the right to vote. They're trying to reverse. Nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about some of our schools are the worst schools.
The worst.
And when Gary was on here, I know people kind of got disturbed because but I understood what he was saying. We sitting in billions of dollars in Ukraine, and we got kids in this school who's sitting in 90-degree buildings trying to get educated.
It's the truth.
With 10-year-old textbooks.
Yeah.
Teachers in this country are barely getting paid, and they got to spend money out their own pocket to buy stuff. So, and then if you look at Florida, if that goes in Florida, they're gonna start trying to go to another state and then another state. If he gets in office, all that stuff is going to go across the country. Black history is going to be gone. But there's nobody talking about that. Everybody, so the thing about the fight is because it was a physical thing, everybody, but the mental side and the educational part, did you see the uproar about when the judges passed, federal judges or the Supreme Court turned around and overturned affirmative action for some of those Ivy League schools? No one, no uproar.
And it's kind of funny because it's a part. I just watched Daytona Tyrone on Netflix. Yeah. I don't know if y'all have seen or heard.
No, I'm going to see it. I heard it. I'm going to see it.
But it was tones of that in there where, like, if we were to ever come together, the people that are in the dope boys and people on the block and just people in the community, how much change that we could cause, like
in a week, Chris, in a week.
They fear us coming together. You know what I mean? So it's just like I would hope that this could be a moment for an agent, like just a change, but at the same time, that this is the disheartening part. It felt good to see that, but I don't see it happen being like a consistent thing.
But let's go back to Colin Kaepernick.
This into something else.
Colin Kaepernick and Nike showed you the blueprint when Nike didn't bail on Colin Kaepernick. When everybody said, "Oh, you got to drop him, because they know who had the dollars. They know who was buying LeBron James. They know they weren't buying the on sale stuff. They buying stuff. They know who had the buying power. So Nike did not. They put it out there more because they understood they weren't going to lose anything. So we do have the power. We just don't use it. We spend more money as a race of people than any other ethnic group in this country. We do. So that's part of power. And I say it all the time. Can you imagine if every African American said, we're not going to Chick-fil-A. No. We ain't gonna go to Chick-fil-A for a week or for a month. I know that's why I use it. But I'm just saying, we're not gonna buy Nike sneakers for a month. We're not gonna go to Walmart for a month. We're not gonna go for Target for a month. You imagine people will pay attention. It's just like when
we're not disciplined enough to do that as a community.
No, I agree with you 200%. But that's my point. But we disciplined to get behind that video. And if we were there, a lot of people would join in.
Sure. I mean, a bunch of people would join in.
So I'm saying, so what are you willing to fight for? And that's where the question. And I'm not talking about just physically fight. What are you willing to fight for? And that's the question around what we're talking about. Because Alabama, again, I don't condone violence. I know somebody's out there saying, yeah, you're supposed to be. I don't. However, I do condone self-defense.
True.
I do condone self-defense.
I mean, we're not even just defending somebody, period. Because that's really what that was about too. Like defending somebody.
I think
that was in need.
Go ahead, yeah, I'm just curious. Do you think this Caucasian would have acted different, say if it was like a Caucasian security guard or an Asian security guard or something like that?
Maybe not Asian, but yeah.
Well, you know what I compare this to, and I said this to somebody, and they had to stop and think about it because they were questioning, what's the difference between what America is doing with Ukraine?
What do you mean?
Ukraine is being bullied, and America's coming to their aid. Now, they're not physically involved, but they're sending money, they're sending, supplies, they're sending weapons, they're coming to their aid. So I went a step further. If I give you a gun and you shoot and kill somebody, I'm an accessory. I can go to jail for being an accessory. It happens all the time. People want to make a big deal of it because it happened, in that situation because it was African Americans, but that happens all the time.
Yeah.
And so, when I hear people use that logic, and I'm sure there's some black people gonna come out and say the same stupid logic, that logic doesn't make sense. That logic is illogical because, like I said, Ukraine's being bullied by Russia, America's stepping in.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you can definitely draw comparisons between the two. But of course, you feel like the logic they're going to use. So this is a country, this is people like they were talking about that are getting bombed. He was getting bombed up on too.
They were, but this is a person in this country.
Yeah.
This is a person in this country, and check this out. it's just like the thing.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
We care way too much about what goes on a lot of times
Everywhere
in other
else.
countries than we
And
do.
another thing I want to talk about slavery. A lot of
Here.
times, this country, slavery was, man, not only was it, they kind of started it and birthed it here, they fought for it. We had a civil war over that.
I mean, they still fighting over keeping
But I'm just saying,
statues and
many
remnants and stuff now.
many people died over that.
Yeah.
So I'm saying,
Americans.
and if you go, Americans, sure enough, Americans. And if you go back and look at it, some of that damage to those statues, to the memories, that stuff is still going on.
Right.
So back to what we want to fight for. When do we as people understand, man, that that we still need to start standing up, have a voice. We need to start advocating for ourselves. We need to start using our dollars wisely.
Yeah. So I was going to say, like, what are some of the things that we should for, because I don't think people really quite understand. I would say, from my perspective, and just seeing how people talk a lot of times, all you hear is vote. They just telling you to vote. They're not telling you what to vote for, what to vote about, what's important, like educating people at a keyword. Right. It's just, get out and vote. Make sure you're not doing your part.
Vote for who I tell you to vote for. I agree. I agree. But
you're not even educating people on it, honestly.
But I think that's part of it. It goes back to, I'm going back to the educational system. I think you got to start by investing more money in our schools. You start by paying teachers more. I keep hearing everybody talking about teachers leaving, teachers. I'm in school getting fussed at, abused, and I got to spend money in my own pocket to buy supplies. After a while, you kind of feel defeated. I'm talking to a teacher the other day, and there's a kid in the class that he really liked Chafel, but because the kid has parent is in the school, they want to get a kid to pass. That's not, you put teachers in those peculiar situations.
Kids in the school,
but that happens all the time. So as teachers, you got to pay teachers more. Once you pay teachers more, you attract better people. You attract better quality people. The second thing is, like I said, I'm in a school and it's 87 degrees, not 8 o'clock in the morning, and you got kids in the summer program.
And the teachers too gotta be in that mess. Right?
Yeah,
that's crazy.
But why is it with all the money? Like I said, and again, Gary would say, I'm not. People got upset, but you send them billions of dollars. You can't buy some air conditioning units and stick in the windows of some of these schools. Because I'm in a school. One of the schools I was in had the big units in the window, and they were cooling up the classrooms fine.
I mean, we do all types of tax breaks for big corporations and companies.
CEOs,
right? Yeah, we. I think
Walmart adopt a school in your neighborhood. How much money you spend on Walmart? Target.
That's something I think should be like they should make something like that. These big corporations, they should start helping our community. I think another thing too, just kind of related to education and historically speaking, and just being that our people gamble a lot, the lottery, how so much money gets raised in that. It was initially started out for education. Where did that go?
Yeah, it's supposed to be.
Where did that go? So I think it's I think over time, people have lost sight of what the true goals or aims of a certain thing, and when you don't talk about it for so long, it kind of just runs away, gets away from you.
It's in a lot of the commercials.
Same thing in our
money goes to senior citizens. They say real quick, but even then, you have people who say, I was talking to somebody the other day, and he goes, "Man, I'm with a lot of you, man. My problems will be over." What the song say? More money, more trouble, whatever, is going to be a different kind of trouble. The problem is the mentality. The mentality doesn't change because you get money. If you tear your house up in North Philly, when you in Beverly Hills, you will tear your house up. Mm-hmm. If you're not taking care of a Volkswagen, you're not going to take care of the Benz. So I think the mentality has to change, and it goes back to the educational system you can't educate kids now the way you were 30, 40 years ago. You can't. It has to change, man. You got schools that don't have technology. So how is a kid graduating from a public school without updated technology going to compete? How? You can't compete. You're not teaching kids how to write their name. So they can't even sign contracts. They can't even get a passport because they don't know how to write in cursive. That kid is destined for failure. You can't compete.
I feel like I asked this question too. It's like, what do you do when like the parents or the population don't know? Like they don't know what's going on. They don't. I'm sure people don't understand.
But I think
AI and all these technology things and bigger picture scope. Like it's not everybody's thinking like that.
King of the world, as they say, you put AI labs in school. You put that equipment in school, and you start teaching kids, and you start doing hands-on stuff. I guarantee you, a lot of kids will gravitate towards that. Yeah. I guarantee you, if you invest money in school, you update the schools that they had air conditioning, they had updated libraries, they had updated technology. And I'm guaranteed you attendance will go up in school, participation will go up in school. But
conspiracy theory though.
Yeah,
I feel like they don't want that.
No, I agree.
If there's more chaos, there's more money in that. It's money in the prison.
Well,
and
it separates the classes.
That's it. Yeah.
It separates the classes. It's like when I hear a lot of people with degrees telling, "Oh, you don't need a degree." Yeah, but your kids going to college. These kids don't need a degree. You don't need a degree.
Right, but they send their kids
your
right
kids
to the
to
best school. Like, that is insane.
Yeah, you got 4 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Well, college is not for everybody. Yeah, but you telling your kid you can get a college degree so you compete. So I think I agree with you 100% about parents. But if I know parents are not doing something, then the society has to pick up the pace. Society has to pick up the pace. That is goes back to what you're talking about. But goes back to what you're talking about. Just like they should help the guy who's being jumped. Society needs to pick up the pace and help our kids. Those kids who don't have, it's like when you were teaching the autistic kid how to play basketball. You didn't have to do that. And it wasn't like you were doing it because he was going to the NBA or somewhere else. Compassion. That still has to come into place. That's supposed to separate us from the animals. It was supposed to make us different. And I go back to the people. There were times, man.
Critical thinking.
We're black folk. We're connected. I was laughing because there was a time when I used to work in Center City, and Caucasians used to ask me, "Man, y'all know everybody." Because we used to speak, it was polite to speak to. Hey, what's up, bro? It was just a polite thing to do.
All the black people. That's it.
Yeah.
You know everybody.
Or even now when I do know people, people like, man, but I mean, but it's just if you treat people a certain way, you do get to know a lot of people.
Yeah, you do. Like just by being open and nice, and you never know where that might take you later. Because it's been times where just kind of keeping in touch with people or being nice to people, you create a brotherhood of sorts.
I was in
a network, and I think that's important.
I was in Walgreens yesterday. Mm-hmm. So I walk in the door. This guy said, "Yo, you Chris's dad, right?" I've never seen this guy before in my life, man. So I go back to get my stuff, and I come back. So I say, there's a group of kids hanging outside. What's up? He said, "Oh, you Chris's dad?" He said, "I just ran to Chris's train station. He was going to Baltimore. I was going to Boston." I told him that. He told me that you come in here, but then he begins to tell me, "This is crazy, that these kids outside that they snatch. They ask people to buy water ices and they don't buy it. They snatch the water ices." Dinged a 80-year-old lady's car, and she got out saying something. This group of girls beat her up.
Are you kidding me? Because this Walgreens is in a good neighborhood.
But the point, he knows the history. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking to myself, like, where's the cops at?
Yeah.
I'm thinking the street.
Yeah,
walk to Wall Park. Oh. So and then because I saw your mom said, "What they standing there for?" And I thought they were waiting for somebody. I thought they were waiting for a ride or something. So the point I'm making is, what are you willing to fight for? Because those kids got parents. They belong to somebody. Mm. They ain't a bunch of orphans just standing in the corner with nothing going on. They belong to somebody.
We used to go out and hang out and not be around.
But you weren't beating people up.
Right. That's what I was about to say. So then where is the disconnect now? Like, where has it, like, because I feel like, again, kids, we've always gone out and not been around our parents.
But no, I didn't mean, I meant in the sense that, Chris, you know when your kid is enough.
Like, why don't Dad, what's funny about you saying that? You should know. Some of these parents I don't know if they're rude for, like, they just don't care. That's my baby.
But that's my question. What are you willing to fight for? If you're willing to fight for your child, then you should try to put your child in the best possible position to succeed. That means teach them character, teach them some integrity, teach them to make good choices. Teach them to not always be the victim. I used to get into this discussion. I never forget. I spoke. Your mom with me. I spoke at this university, and I was spoken in class, and they were talking about how prisoners don't be slaves because it was a book came out, and I was always the bad guy because I disagreed with it. And you go to prison. I said, no. The difference is when you go to prison, most of those guys, not all, most of those guys in prison volunteer for that. They did something wrong. Slavery, they came to your home, to your country. You didn't get a vote. You didn't do anything. Chris, you mind your own business in your hut. And they came and grabbed you and took you over and sold your offspring and made you. And so you can't put those two together. And there was a whole group of people, and my logic behind it was, what is an unfair system? And I said, well, let me ask you a question. If I know it's an unfair system, why would I continue to put myself at that system's mercy?
Yeah, I think one thing that's kind of stands out. We've said this before. It's like there was a generation, especially probably when that No Child Left Behind started. You know, like when people were just kind of pushing them through, people didn't really care.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing, you know, those are our adults.
Those children are having children.
They're having children. And I think we talk a lot of it at times of like, yeah, their parents should be doing this, their parents instilling this. But I think we're at a point where parents didn't have that. So it's like, how can we create? And now we're creating this snowball generation.
But it has to happen somewhere else. That's something schools have to begin to play a larger role. Schools have to start teaching character education. School has to start talking about integrity. School has to start talking about right and wrong. School has to start setting boundaries.
At that point, I feel like the school is going to end up owning our kids. The state,
they're already owned. The state already owns them. They just get them in a different way.
Yeah, that's actually.
And the school owns them because the school determines, unless you get the kids and the parents the section of the school already determines the outcome. Because we're not going to educate them.
A really creepy TV show where your kids come home, you can't control.
I guess more programs and
like relationships. More relationships, man. You can't take a person that's. I don't care who the person is. If the person does not have a good, and you know this through coaching, if the person does not have a good relationship with you, it's hard to speak logic or speak anything to that person because you can't change norms. And I just did a workshop and I talked about this. Our norms are normal. And what I mean by norm is those things that you're used to, that's embedded in you, that's your norm. You just don't change your norm because somebody comes along who you don't know and says, that's just no. You change your norm because it's like when you get the kid that's hard to coach. It's like when we used to play in the league. They started give us the worst kids. We started winning the championship. Oh, you can't coach that kid, this kid, and they conform. Why? Because you built a relationship with them. You just can't walk up to a kid and start screaming at him. Because to your point, I don't know his background. I don't know his trauma. I don't know what he's been through. I don't even know how to communicate with him. So you build a relationship so you can do that. And it's not going to work with everybody, but you got to start somewhere because the way we go now, come on, man. I mean, they build more prisons in high schools, in this country right now.
Again, I think that's part of where I'm like, it's intentional. They don't want to help with education.
Like they do
because what is the stat where it's like if they can't do something by third grade?
They test in third grade, man. If they test a certain low and they on free lunch, I forget all the things they do. They determine.
It's like some data out there that kind of supports probably even the rate in which they create these prisons. They look at the testing, they look at those areas, and then they're like, we need to make more prisons.
But you said something earlier, and I agree when you said conspiracy. It is because if I control the laboratory, I can pretty much control the outcome. So I can sit here and say, I'm just saying. If I can control the situation, of course the data is going to say what I wanted to say. That's like if I say, you know what, I'm going to do a research and I'm going to prove that 80% of African Americans don't smoke. All I got to do is go to a neighborhood where they don't smoke. And whoever I need to control it, I can control the data. Yeah. I bring all these guys in who I know don't smoke. You know what? Out of 100, I'm bringing 20 who do smoke because I got to get to 80%. Of course, I can say 80%. I'm not going to say only survey. I did the survey and 80% of the survey. So when you can control the laboratory, you can pretty much control, the data because the data is going to say what you wanted to say.
So you don't think that's a real stat?
No, I think a lot of stats are either inflated or deflated to fit the circumstances. If I'm trying to get $1 million or a $60 million grant, I can't go in with no 42% chance of success. I got to go with a higher percentage. So I got to figure out how to get your percentage out.
Yeah, but I still do think that's a real stat, though. Like in terms of
what's a real stat?
Where if kids aren't at a certain level, like just a predictor of them not necessarily.
No, but see, I disagree because it's more to it than that. Right, there's a lot of kids. I mean, the kid's home life. A kid could be eating free lunch and testing below score and have good parents who this kid turns out pretty good because you got to support. It happens a lot.
What stat is that? You got that stat?
I can talk to some of your friends. All your friends ain't grow up in Cheltenham. All your friends ain't grow up in Green Bay. And I grew up in North Philly, and I got a lot of friends who came out all right. I grew up in North Philly, and I got a lot of friends who came out all right.
We're not saying grew up in North Philly. We're talking about.
But that's the same step. We're talking about a neighborhood of poverty.
I don't know anybody that couldn't read at a certain level at a certain point.
But no, I didn't say. I said
that's what we're talking about.
No, they don't say couldn't read. It's a test at a certain level, which means they're not testing up to what they say the standard is. They didn't say couldn't read. It's a test at a certain level.
Your reading and math, right?
Yeah, but their standard level. They put up, but kids,
I did this test?
but kids, yeah, you did. Kids grow. Yes, yes, you did. That's my point. So you grow. You don't always stay the same. Every kid is not going to stay at that level. So you got a chance. You can with the right support, you can get better in education. You can come. You can get better. You can get better.
It's saying it's a predictor. It's not saying every kid.
No, but the
percentages, the
probability. But the way it is, yeah, probability. Because I'm controlling the experiment. I'm keeping schools poor. I'm not putting resources in the school to help Johnny catch up with reading. But that's so it's not really a fair stat because I'm feeding the stat. I'm stuffing the stat.
I mean, it is a fair stat. Really, they're creating that. You know what I mean? It is a fair stat to say if I know that the issue is education, I'm going to make sure that it's poor.
We both playing basketball. You know you like to shoot the three. So your shoot percentage. No, hurry up.
With a hand in your face. I'm gonna put a hand in your face.
No. You hear what I'm about to say? Your shoot percentage is like say you coming around 70%. My shooting percentage is like 90% because I'm shooting layups. It ain't the same. It's not the same. It's okay. You imagine a shooting percentage, but my shot is a higher percentage. So realistically that needs to be factored in because you're shooting 30, 40 feet from the basket. I'm shooting 4 feet from the basket.
I don't understand how that ties in.
Because that's not you. Because you compare you're looking at two shooting percentages, but it's not being accurately assessed. Because there's other factors in your percentage than my percentage. The factors in your percentages, you're further away from the basket. You're taking more of a risk than I'm taking. So your percentage is going to be lower. So that I just can't say, oh, I shot 80%. Because you would say that to me. If we sat down and we looked at that, and you say, well, look where you're shooting from, and look where I'm shooting from. That's the first thing that would come out your mouth.
I don't think this is like comparable.
It is because my point is, if I turn around and say, okay, I need this stat to say X amount of kids are not going to be so up to par. And I don't follow them after that to see. Yeah, in the third grade, little Johnny may be reading at a second grade level, but maybe little Johnny parents stepped up the bar. By the time he came to the 8th grade, he was up to par. Or maybe he graduated and maybe he became a tradesman.
I think the crux of the debate is that if you don't have an education level at a certain point, that you're more likely to go to prison.
No, see now we keep
in the beginning,
but now we keep. But see, what I keep saying is there's more variables to it than just your education.
But it's a big. So it's not the only thing, but it's a large part of it. But I think that's why that was the point of that's why education sits in the way it is because
I would agree with that. When I was growing up, it was 1 out of 3. When I was growing up, it was like, okay, 1 out of 3 y'all from this community is going to go to prison.
And your schools were a lot better.
It was 1 out of 3. 1 out of 3. Some of them, because I was fortunate enough to go to a smaller school, and I had teachers who cared. And back then, I guess I'm assuming teachers were paid a salary.
What does that school look like now?
It's closed. It's gone. That's what I did. So I'm not saying I agree with you. I think it's on purpose. What I'm saying is when I hear stats like that, and especially when I'm in there talking to these kids, there's different variables. There's some kids who don't do well academically, but are smart because they don't test well. They just don't take tests well. I believe it's also stats they see students rule the world. That's true. I believe that's really true. I mean, a lot of people who are high, but they not 4.0.
It is true. I mean, those are mediocre students. We're not talking about them.
So, but I'm saying, so when I hear that stat, I kind of take it with a grain of salt. And then how many people did you survey? Because if I go down to a neighborhood that's a high crime rate, I'm gonna
it's impossible to survey everybody.
No, but you see, you're not even hearing what I'm saying. If I go to a neighborhood that's a high crime rate, of course that kid's more likely to go to jail. But if I go to a neighborhood where the education is low and the crime rate is not that high, he's less likely to go to jail.
What would you say the majority of our black cities or populations look like? Are they crime-ridden or not?
But some are higher than others. So I'm saying when you increase the percentage of possibilities of something happening, of course the data is going to be different. It's going to be different.
I understand that. I don't think it's ever going to be absolute, but it's still.
But everybody says it like it is absolute. But everybody says it like it is
It's
absolute. But when they use it like it is absolute. Nobody sits out there and says, "Oh well, there's exceptions, there's different variables. This is how we did it."
It takes too long to say. It takes too long to
tell the truth.
No, it's just like, look, if you want to see that, read the paper.
No, I don't.
The whole
it's just like when I had people. Okay, I do fatherhood, and when I had people say, and I did my piece on absentee dads through abandonment incarceration.
This because we know research.
No, and I did the research, and what I found out was what I was saying wasn't always true. Every father wasn't a deadbeat dad. Because he just walked away. No, there were some who fought lost in court, who had all these different issues. There were so many other variables that I wasn't hearing, but I'm hearing these stats. Yeah. When I hear the stats, 8 out of 10, and when I looked at it, it's fatherless people in the Caucasian community too. But when I first got involved hearing the stats, that I was seeing the picture of the black guy with these stats up there, making me believe, it's only African. No. And then I found out another thing. There's a lot of brothers more than even talk about who take care of their kids, who fight to take care of their kids. Who do what they're supposed to do. But when I first got into it and I started looking at how the stats were presented, I thought, man, what are we doing? And I still say we need help. I'm not saying we don't. But I'm saying it wasn't as bad when I got in as they made it believe, because they were people getting funded off of that. Oh, these black fathers not taking care of their kids, and they do all these stats, and you believe the stats like, man, that's 8 out of 10, that's 80% of a neighborhood. You 8 out of 10 homes, and you believe this, then you really stop to look around like, nah, come on, man. Maybe in some communities, that's not every community. So I'm saying is there are variables. I'm not saying the stats, okay, maybe they are legit, but they don't explain that there's variables. I'm not going into detail. What are the variables that go with it? And I think it's just like, look at the Eagles. Perfect example. Let's do sports.
Everybody has it's like nobody's this.
But when I hear people,
mean something.
This is a perfect example. Every team the Eagles beat in the NFC East went to the playoffs. Everybody in the playoffs, exception of San Francisco, till they beat them in the playoffs, they beat. But everybody was talking about the Eagles played a soft schedule because the year before those teams weren't good. The data they used to judge those teams was from the year before. Not from the current, what was actually happening in front of them. So therefore, they played an inferior schedule. Nobody came back after the season and said, all those teams made the playoffs. They went from the NFC East to NFC East. So that's what I'm talking about. How
that's people take data. A crazy thing too. Like,
but they do it though.
Yeah, you could win 60% of your games, but nobody's gonna be like, well, those 60% of your games, well, this team was under 500.
But that's what they did. That's what they do.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares really.
Like, at this level,
you can say all this things all you want.
People make a living off it. You say it all the time. Talking heads make a living off of that.
60%.
But talking heads make a living off of that. I'm listening the other day, and they trying to explain how Jalen Hurts not in the top 6 quarterbacks. And so somebody said, well, wait a minute. He played the game of life in the Super Bowl. Josh Allen's never been to a Super Bowl. Joe Burrow's always hurt. Was the same thing you said. He had the one good year, but yet you say he only did it for 1 year. What was the difference?
He tried to discredit my guy.
But that's so people can turn stuff around. So I think that's why I think sometimes we have to understand the variables before we, and I get what you're saying. It's not absolute, but some people hear that they think it's absolute.
But I think what's crazy then is even at the crux of this conversation is we talking about fighting. Right. What are we fighting for?
But you got to know what you're fighting for, though. You got to know what you're fighting for. And a lot of times we don't. We ill-informed.
Like, yeah.
So we don't,
there is so many battles up that you feel like these uphill battles you need to take.
Yeah, but so what do you quit on life?
No, ain't nobody say quit on life.
No, I'm just saying. So you
come together and put your hands on it.
It's just like an elephant. It's one at a time. It's just like you take one bite at a time. If you want to change, if you want to get away from poverty, you got to educate people. You can't be uneducated and expect that you're going to escape poverty. It's not going to happen. It's not, and because they're going to keep raising the bar, keep changing the system. Just like now, when they have kids don't know how to sign their name, they can't even get a passport to leave the country. There are certain jobs you got to sign, and you actually have to sign a contract that you can't print your name. So they disqualify from that. Kids. I mean, some of the stuff these kids who don't learn, that they don't learn, they automatically disqualify. They can't compete. So now you're destined to be poor because you can't even get in the game. So that's my point. Where I think I agree with you when you said that it's
like when you find like you don't have no skills, but that's the find a way to get something.
But that's the stuff that you gotta. But that's what we gotta. And I don't mean fight, but that's the stuff we gotta do better advocating for. Mm-hmm. No kid should be sitting in the school building right now where it's 87 degrees, while the people who run the district sit in the building where they got central air conditioning, where they got to put on sweaters because it's cold. But the kids, but the kids got to go into a building where there's no air. They got books from 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It's and teachers got to go and they spend money out their own pocket, to buy supplies, and work in subpar conditions. So I think that's the stuff that we got to start to fight for, so we can change the narrative. And it's not going to happen overnight. so we can begin to change the narrative.
Yeah. So I think one thing kind of related to this coming together and fight, I think very much so we kind of made this a white and black thing. But I think to actually generate some change, similar to Martin Luther King, it's like you need to make this more kind of a people thing. Like there's an education system that's failing across this country, period, white or black. You know, there's a economic issue or problem that's happening for white people too. And I think that's like it's strength in numbers, pretty much. You know, like where I think finding common ground to really generate some push. Because sometimes it's like, man, are they going to do it just if it's black people?
But if you go back to Martin Luther King and you study Martin Luther King, he united black folk first.
Of course,
you gotta have a call to bring people into. People are not going to come into a cause that's splintered. Yeah. Why am I going to get involved in something that's already splintered, that's already divided? So you gotta have a core to draw people to. You know, so I agree with you, but you got to start with a core. You got to have something that's just going to draw people in.
I understand that. I feel, of course, that's definitely a part of it. I'm not saying like, yo, just skip over us and let's bring them in. But I was saying like, just you need allies. You know, like I think again, it's strength in numbers, and I think when we sometimes get so kind of lost in the weed of things that we try to ask out people that you might need to help.
Well, no, we weren't out. I wasn't asking anybody.
No, I'm not saying. I'm talking about people in general.
But we have to make sure before is like you got to make sure your stuff is right before you invite somebody to the table.
Yeah,
and you can't go into a room and 3 of y'all is saying A B C D and then 2 of y'all singing X Y Z because why is somebody gonna join this harmony? So when they come in, they're gonna have to join one side. Mm-hmm. And then that just further strengthens one side against the other side. So you got to get on the same page. I agree with you 300%. But we don't even have a core right now to start with. We don't even have a ground zero.
What does that even look like? What does that look like?
Deciding what we want to fight for, deciding educational system. Everybody, that's the one thing that a lot of people got in common is their kids got to go to school. They got to go to school. That's the one thing that you can't escape. They got to go to school. So, and everybody can't afford to move into a better neighborhood to put their kids into a better school. Mm-hmm. And we're like that because, and I'm guilty of the same thing, the people who could move, moved. Unfortunately, the people who couldn't move got left behind. And when the people who could afford to move, moved, the people who decided the resources took more resources from them. Mm-hmm. So now the people left behind, not only they couldn't move, they have less resources to work with. It's the same thing you see in the city now when these new townhouses are popping up and they rezone it because the kids don't want to send their kids to the neighborhood school, so they rezone it. And people don't understand is every time they take kids away from that school, they take federal dollars away from that school. Of course. So it goes back to education, not just academics, but education on how the world works. How politics work, how you got to bring different to the people to the table, like you said.
They need to teach that in school.
Oh, that would have been such a good class. How politics really work.
I mean, that's actually like I said, things
Let me say this, and then this is kind of off the beaten path, but your mom's looking at TV, I'm listening, and this lady says, I don't care if Donald Trump goes to jail. He can be the president from jail. I'm thinking to myself, did you hear yourself say that?
You would look forward.
But see, we've produced a society that is all that it's not about the greater good for the greater number of people. It's about what's good for me. And that's what we got to get away from that. You got, I'm working after school programs. And I had this conversation with people all the time. People complain, this is not a program of you. It's a program of it's about these kids. And it's about your other staff. And this ain't your personal program where it has to meet all your needs. You got to check all the boxes.
I'm such an old man because immediately I feel like I always come back to this. I'm like, social media, giving everybody their personal soapbox to get up there, say what they want. You got followers, people like it, people love it.
I can't.
Yeah, like yo, for real, people want sympathy. They want to feel like people paying attention to them. Like, I think that's a big shift in our culture where people have become a little bit more selfish, and I think that's just because that's a little bit more, and just being nice, being kind. PC,
they won't even let you cross the street, man.
PC,
they be fine.
But I'm just like, but still, it's crazy. Yeah. Especially, I think we're at an age where we kind of seen the shift a little bit. Like I remember a point in time where, like, I could just go out and walk down the street and like just people saying hi, like how you doing, getting to know people. Now it's like people on their phones, they locked in. Like you can literally be out and watching people just kind of in their own world, recording themselves, like not caring about anything or anyone around them. And don't let you get in the video. It's your fault. Like, you know what I mean?
This goes back to what I said, what do we want to fight for? And there's one who works with kids. I see these little kids, man, and they're so innocent. They don't know. You know, they think they living their best life. They have no idea, man. You know, when I'm hanging out with my grandson, you know, he don't know. He think this is life.
Yeah.
And the generation is every generation should try to make it better for the generation that's following them. That's not happening. You know,
nobody's thinking like that because it's me.
Because
like,
we don't
gotta get my
time now. What do we want to fight for? You know, we'll fight for stupid stuff. We'll fight, yo, man, we don't want the school to close because I need my daughter to go to prom in the school.
That's actually
you know, stuff like that. We'll argue all day long about, man, you know, they took my daughter's cell phone in school. You know, forget the fact that she shouldn't have known.
Generations before us were definitely on some like, all right, well, I gotta make sure I'm doing this for my kids, my grandkids. You don't really hear that a lot right now. You hear people like, I gotta live up to my best. I gotta take this trip, or I gotta
my best life.
Yeah, I gotta live my best life. I gotta do what's best for me. Like that's all you hear today. And it's like I said, it's definitely been this shift now of like you know, doing for others, which at the end of the day I think is our true purpose of life. But it's just this shift of, and then you see a lot of people being more miserable too, because it's just me. You're never satisfied, never happy.
There used to be an old African proverb that you heard all the time. It takes a whole village to raise a child. You don't hear that anymore.
No. If you say that, they take a what?
A village. You don't hear that anymore, man, because
a village.
That time is over. I mean, we don't look out for each other. I mean, it's all about looking out for self.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about looking out for number one. And I think until we determine what we're willing to fight for, that's going to have substantial change, something that can be sustained. Like, I'm not saying get emotional, go out there and march, and then 6 weeks later we back doing the same crazy stuff we were doing. You know, what are we willing to fight for? And that's across the board. You know, we got people getting divorced at an alarming rate because they don't want to fight for their relationships. You got people who, you know, who quit jobs without thinking about it. Like the one we were laughing at who quit because they wouldn't let her off to go to the Beyonce concert. Like, what do you do with the rest of your life? You know, then somebody told me that I think it was you told me somebody sold their house so they wanted to go see Travis Scott and Egypt. You know, that's stuff like that, man. But that's stuff. But see, that's we have to start to educate each other. Yeah, to your point. But see, living in the moment that's why we don't promote change. That's why we don't provoke change, because everybody knows is a time capsule for us. We got this little bit of snapshot that we get emotional about, and then we go back to business as usual. We go back to business as usual. And that what are we willing to fight for needs to be a question, man. That should be, politicians should be asked that question. You want me to fight for you? What you want me to fight for? You up there jumping up and down, yo, you're not looking out for me. Okay, what am I looking out for?
Yeah.
You know, what do you want to do to help me? And you said, I love what you said earlier. Yo, they telling you to vote and you vote for them because of that person told you to vote, but are you researching it?
Nope.
You pulling the lever, God only shows up on your neighbor at election time. Other than that, you don't see him.
Yeah, and I think this might be a whole nother conversation too. But when people say like we're not educating ourselves, and vote, I just remember Joe Biden got the nerve to say, "You're not black if you don't vote for him."
Yeah, I mean, that's not the word.
What?
Remember that's not the word. Hillary Clinton? She carried hot sauce.
But pandering and stuff going on. But you know, like I think
he'll go to church.
But I don't blame him. I blame people who get duped by that. I do. When you get the first time is
way too comfortable.
That's it. I posted something the other day. I said, you know what? And I think this is a lot of people. You know, I think a lot of people don't understand. When you continuously give people something for free, whether it's advice, whether it's counsel, whatever it is, they don't recognize your value. They don't recognize your value. You know, they don't. But I don't blame them. I blame us for educating ourselves. First time, shame on you. Second time, shame on me. You know, I mean, we got to start thinking like that. Like, you know, I knew good and well, and I said to your mom, there ain't no way he was going to get student loans. With him and Bernie saying that stuff, no way they were going to get student loans this much. They don't have that kind of power. But you got to do your research. They don't have that kind of power to control a whole economic system. They don't. The president doesn't have that kind of power. They don't.
Give you a pause and break.
But I'm just saying, there's certain, but that's certain things you got to educate yourself because you got to use common sense. You got to stop thinking that some mouse is going to come and rescue you and solve your problem. It's like when I'm talking and somebody says, yeah, well, 3 weeks after Trump got in office, Trump was good for the economy. He been in it 3 weeks. What can he do in 3 weeks? He was living off the residue of the stuff Obama and other people passed. But that was people, and a black person said that too. In their mind,
we've had this conversation. I don't know if this is on air or not, but once people got that check,
so what do we mean? But it goes back to what we want to fight for, and that's how you stop people from fighting. You buy them out.
You buy them out.
But our school systems are crashing and burning. The generations behind us are not going to be educated.
It's crazy because people was definitely happy when they got that check. Wasn't nobody talking about nothing. The world was all right.
But that's where we gotta figure out what's worth fighting for. And I'll go all the way back to the beginning. So the Alabama thing, but what about the rest of the stuff that's happening in society? What about our failing school system? What about the neighborhoods or food deserts because they don't advocate supermarkets?
What about just infrastructure? Period. Like that's falling apart all the way.
But you gotta be willing to fight for it. Yeah. We went to the Eagles thing. It was 50,000 people down there, man. I'm still in, and when I tell people that, people say I'm amazed that 50,000 people showed up, for practice. And I was glad because I'm an Eagles fan. However, we could use that energy because it was a lot of us down there.
Of course.
You could use some of that energy for other things, man. If 50,000 people showed up at City Hall and said, we demand change in our schools, and to your point, more people will come when they see that.
And you want to know what's actually...
More people would be attracted.
It's like kind of to that point, and like again, it's just showing what do we fight for and how easily we can come together and cause destruction. It was this kid in New York, Kai Santa. He was giving out a PlayStation, and he got millions of followers. The streets was flooded in New York.
Yeah.
Like stuff just shut down.
Yeah, I saw that.
And, like
they looking for him.
Yeah, they are looking for him. They want to push charges. Inciting a riot.
Did he just release an apology or something?
Yeah.
What do you want to fight for? People will shoot you in your tracks now because you looked at them.
That's too. Like,
I don't even beat that people no more.
Don't beat nobody.
People will shoot you. So, but meanwhile, the kid goes to a school, man, where they're underfunded, uneducated. Meanwhile, your kid is in the 6th grade reading at a 3rd grade level.
Yeah, I think it's to the point we kind of mentioned in reference about this with the whole situation. We're more willing to actually physically fight than we are to, kind of fight and be behind something that'll benefit the community as large.
And as we close, I'm doing this parenting series. So every day filming. You know how many times no parent showed up?
All the time. I'm gonna say
really? No. Sometimes parents, but you know how many times no parent showed up, and you would think with the state of the school system and all the stuff we see with kids that parents would actually come out and say, hey, how can I help my kid? How can I be a better partner with the school? You would think that would be something parents would do.
They're not really too proactive. I feel like they'll come when they're like, oh, my kid, he failed. What happened? Where were you at the first few parent conversations? Like when we were talking about this, and we could have let you know this up front. Or the things that we sent home, I
was talking to kids in summer school who didn't go to class. So if the parent was involved, you knew your kid wasn't going to class. You didn't find out at the end of the school year.
Right. Yeah.
All of a sudden, man, you left the house every day, but you missed 60 days of school.
They called the house.
And report card. You get report
cards.
The
report card. Yeah.
But that's my point. That's my point. We have to figure out
what we're going to fight for. When it's too late.
We didn't go up there and fight the teacher because she did give little Johnny a date. Or she took Jenny's cell phone. Jenny was playing with the cell phone.
Johnny did deep work.
We'll fight for that kind of stuff. But the stuff we need to fight for a better education system. That stuff we don't fight for.
Yeah.
We quick to get somebody fired for looking at us cross-eyed, but somebody's not teaching our kids for year after year after year. We don't say a word.
Man.
We go to a supermarket who constantly gives us bad service and overcharge us repeatedly because it's convenient.
I'm guilty.
But anyway, we had 8:31, man, so we'll let it pass. I'm surprised we didn't pick up one.
I did. I just didn't want to say anything, guys. Welcome. I wasn't here for the beginning. Thank you, guys. Thank you for paying attention to us and tuning in to Above Average Black Men. But we're always here to empower, inspire, and uplift the community. Hope you enjoyed our conversation today. Devin, you heard me.
Like, follow, subscribe, share, comment, interact with us. That's A2BM on Instagram, YouTube, and all other platforms. Above average black man.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I got hands. You turned this off?
And that's why I was like, when did that happen? I don't.